Bob Davis here with us today to tell us about his family, and you know we'll all have a very good time, and maybe he'll answer some questions and tell us about his family. Thank you. Twice.
Well, here we are in the bowels of the Sturgis Public Library getting ready to do public speaking. I think my mother would be so very proud. I'm doing this. I can actually feel her presence here, which is kind of creepy in a way. Thanks for inviting me, Dodie. I know this has been done by different families over the past few years. In my case, it wasn't that much work. Carol had the entire family archives all cataloged, all booked up in loose leaf binders, indexes to the binders, and every single picture labeled. So that's what it was like going through this. I probably prepared a lot more material than we have time to
You can take all the time you want.
look at. But so at some point we may just breeze through some of this. Starting out, I think it would be interesting, I'm sure that pretty much everybody in the room knew Carol. How many are old enough to remember Gail and George? So a lot of people here remember those folks. Let's start with the grandparents, starting with Gail. She was born in Boyden, Iowa, 1895. We have her family tree here, which dates back, I thought I saw an entry on there back in the 1700s. Kathy's family, Wayne and Mary Lou, did all of the genealogical research on our family and has kept that all together over the years. There's grandmother posing with a pistol.
Where's that house?
I'm going to guess that was Comanche Court.
It's not Sherman Street.
It's not?
It's on Sherman Street, I think. It's been remodeled a little bit. On the left?
The brick house on Sherman Street?
No, that's regular siding. I don't think it's there, the
Well,
brick house.
I'm not sure where that was taken. Gail became a little bit famous in 1950. She, let me get around where I can see this. She was pictured here meeting the friendly Sunshine Milkman at her door to receive the first paper milk carton delivered to a customer in South Dakota. Now that wasn't really Gail's claim to fame. Her claim to fame is that she kept inning by inning box scores of every World Series game from 1934 until she died. One year in 1941, she was on a train from Sioux City, Iowa to Rapid City during the series, but still caught the game. Another year, she and her husband stopped their car and fastened an antenna to a fence to listen to the game. I also remember that she never ever missed the Saturday night prize fights on TV. She really loved boxing. Norman reminded me, and then I found this in the archives, when she lived at the high-rise, they put a do not disturb
Baseball game.
door during the baseball games. We didn't dare disturb her while that was going on. This was grandmother on the right, with her beloved sister Berdella on the left. from Yakima, Washington. Burdella lived to be about 104 years old. And I remember when we were little kids and Aunt Bertie would come to visit us, the kids were told, never call her Aunt Bertie to her face, she hates that. So it was Aunt Burdella. And there's grandmother at an advanced age riding snowmobiles. That might have been part of your family, Kathy.
Probably the 70s.
George was born in 1893. He was one of 8 children, born in Newcastle, Nebraska. This is a little bit what his family tree looks like. I can't see it on my screen, but it goes back to the early 1800s. He moved with his parents to Missouri at a young age. In 1900, he moved to Lyman County in South Dakota by covered wagon. Got married to Gail Griffith on December 23rd, 1913 in Newcastle, Nebraska. In 1915, they moved to Chamberlain, then moved to Whitewood, then moved to Sturgis, where he opened and operated the Davis Barber Shop. George was honored with a lifetime membership in the South Dakota Barbers Association. Here's an old picture with George on the left. That's a familiar looking sight. George and Gail.
So my grandma Shaw said that everybody that was getting the flapper cut came to George. When women cut their hair off, they came to George. I thought that was cool.
Here was the family. It looks like Wayne on the left, and George and Gail, and I think Donna, and Dale, and Mildred, and Jim Hale on the right.
She was very tall, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was.
So how are you related to that daughter? Norman Hope. Norman's mother is...
Here's a picture of George looking pretty dapper. Now on the back of the picture, there's handwriting by Gail, and here's what she had to say. Here's a picture of George and his prize whiskers. Note the part. Put this picture in your room to scare the rats out. I think I would say that as far as the family was concerned, George had a tremendous sense of humor. He had a very dry wit that, if you knew him, you certainly remember that. Hardly a week goes by, even in my advanced age now, where somebody doesn't come up and tell me a George Davis story. One time, for example, when we were little kids, the whole family attended the Black Hills Roundup at Belle Fourche. And when the roundup was over, we became embroiled in a huge, huge traffic jam trying to get out of the rodeo grounds. Well, after sitting there in the car for a while, and this is back in the 1950s, after sitting in the car, George jumps out, runs up to the intersection and starts directing traffic like a New York City cop. And he would, he got things moving up there and got our lane moving, and when we got through the traffic jam, the door opens and he jumps back in the car. That was Dale, my dad, on the left there. They loved to hunt. This was George with some of his surviving siblings. I don't know if you can see it in any of these pictures, but when George got older, the older he got, the more he looked like President Harry Truman. Especially when he dressed up in a white suit and a Panama hat. And they would often travel, and people, this is really before television, so he would travel and people would mistake him for President Truman. And of course, George never dispelled that. He gave out quite a few autographs. Too. This is George and Gail on the right, and they're longtime friends. I think their names were Henry and Lena Talk from St. Ange. They went on a lot of trips around the country with the Talks. Oftentimes taking this little camper. Our family took that camper and pulled it all the way through Glacier National Park up to Calgary and Banff for the Calgary Stampede in the early 1960s.
So the previous picture was early photoshopping, huh?
Right.
Well, I remember this. This was 1964, Gail and George's 50th wedding anniversary. It was held at our house on Pine Street. There was a lot of drama. There was some drama surrounding that wedding anniversary because George didn't know if he wanted to go or not. And when the day of the anniversary came, the whole family was kind of apprised of how he was feeling, and did he feel well enough to go? How were his bowel movements? Norman reminded me that he often, when he went someplace, he just kept his hat on, because when he got there, he was ready to go about the minute he got there. And this 50th wedding anniversary with all his friends and the whole family there would have been somewhat torturous for George. Here's the family picture from the wedding anniversary. This is kind of how I remember my grandparents. They were wonderful, wonderful people, great sense of humor. Somebody reminded me that, I think it was Lorne, reminded me that after George passed away, when they were married and together and so forth, George was kind of the comedian and Gail was kind of the straight man. And when George passed away, the family became pretty obvious how funny she really was. She had a tremendous sense of humor and a very infectious laugh.
Hey Bob, she and my grandmother talked every morning at 5:30, and Gail would start to laugh, and everybody around her would just come apart. She was so funny.
I think in our family, it was always kind of recognized that the true sense of humor went to Kathy's dad, Wayne. My dad had a good sense of humor and a dry wit, but Wayne really picked up the family sense of humor. Well, Gail passed away on Christmas Eve, 1991. So this is their son, Dale, my dad. Dale was born in Newcastle, Nebraska, 1918. Attended school in Sturgis while assisting George in the barber shop. Became the youngest barber ever licensed in South Dakota at the age of 16. Went to South Dakota State, what we now call South Dakota State University in Brookings, receiving a ROTC commission as second lieutenant. Joined the Armed Forces 1941, served 5 years in the African and European theaters, attaining the rank of captain. Made 6 North Atlantic crossings, transporting prisoners of war to the United States. Married Carol Collins on October 1948. And he was called back into service in 1950, where he served 1 year at 5th Army Headquarters in Chicago and another year in Korea. At the time of his retirement, Davis Barbershop was the oldest family business on Main Street. Here's something they used to do to children, I guess. That's Dale on the right.
Yeah.
That's a young Dale. This picture was taken in Sturgis by Taylor's, and I'm guessing that's about high school graduation time. I can use my pointer here. This is the Scooptown Band. That's Dale right there with the trombone. Graduating from high school, class motto, out of the harbor into the deep. I have to say in those years that was pretty apropos.
Yeah.
So Dale went to Brookings, put himself through college being a barber in Brookings. Always had a fancy car around. That would be in Brookings. Graduating from South Dakota State College, they called it. Graduation pictures. And then, of course, joining the Army. In the archives I went through, I found shoebox after shoebox of letters from George, or from Dale, back to his family, George and Gail, during his time in World War II. I didn't read all the letters, I pulled out a handful of them. I don't know if anybody will ever go through those letters, maybe. But each one has a little gem in it. This was starting out with the letters.
1841 Sherman Street, that's where that house is.
It says, "Dear Dad, better make arrangements to go pheasant hunting with me around the 18th. I won't take no for an answer. As ever, Dale. P.S. I ain't fooling."
That's good.
In this letter, this is August 1941, he says to his parents, "A lot has happened since I last wrote. We're almost to Little Rock. We left Fort Wood Monday morning about 3 a.m. and rode to Willow Springs, Missouri. Tuesday, we walked 13 miles to West Plains. Wednesday, we rode to Imboden, Arkansas. Thursday, we walked 17.5 miles to Smithville, Arkansas." He writes, "You can't imagine the problems in moving 15,000 men. says how many are going this route. There's another bunch headed another way. He says, I hated Missouri, but I believe I hate Arkansas worse. It's hot and sticky, and there's every kind of insect you can imagine. I just killed a big copperhead about 5 minutes ago right by our kitchen. Yesterday morning, an officer got up, and when the orderly was shaking out his blankets, he shook out a big copperhead. You get so tired that the bugs and things don't even bother you. Up by 3 a.m. every morning, lucky if you get 4 hours sleep.
That's right.
This one came from North Africa, 1943. This is a happy day for our outfit. We got a bunch of mail this morning. I received about 6 letters from you. The last one was dated September 16th. I'll probably be getting my mail regularly now. As yet, I haven't heard from Wayne. Wish you'd write more about him. Did he get his furlough? Our future here is still very uncertain. Personally, I don't think we'll be home this year, but it's possible that I'll eat Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner in Sturgis. I can dream, can't I? This is August 1943. Yesterday was a big day around here. We received our first mail since June 1st. One of my men got 92 letters.
Oh my goodness.
You don't realize how much mail means until you've been without it for 2.5 months. Some of the fellows were so excited they just sat on their bunks and shook. Were too excited to even open their mail, let alone read it. They received their mail yesterday and are still reading it over and over. Most of it was good news, but one of my sergeants got a letter telling him his mother had died on July 11th. That makes it pretty tough. This is North Africa, 1944, February. Dear folks, this may be the last letter that you'll receive from me for quite some time. We'll be on the move again in a few days. Wish I could tell you where we were going, but of course I can't. I will say, however, that it's a long way from here. 1944, Sicily. This letter is going to be short and snappy because I have a lot to do tonight. Somebody told me today that pheasant season opens in South Dakota around the 1st of September. If nothing happens, you can get out the shotgun and save up a few gas coupons because I'm liable to be there to go hunting with you. In fact, I think you can go ahead and make plans. Nothing definite yet, but the future looks mighty bright. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed until we pass the big rock. And then I'll know we're on our way home. So eventually, that war did end, and Dale came home, and he and Lyle Owens started a car business, Owens and Davis. I think the location of it is right to the west of what we now know as Bob's Family Restaurant. So it would be between Don's Walk Shop and Bob's Family Restaurant. These pictures were taken during a big blizzard. Here's Carol getting married to Dale in 1938. Reverend C.D. Erskine there on the left. Green, you should come around where you can see.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Huh?
okay, thank you.
Well, we know where Bob came from.
So at this point, I'll interject a little story. Several years ago, my good friend Gary Lippold and I were coming back from probably a movie in Rapid City. And Gary, he had been thinking, and he says, you know, Bob, he says, I have a brother named Bob, and your name is Bob. He says, you know, I have a sister named Peggy. You have a sister named Peggy. And he listed about 3 more coincidences. He says, you know, my mother was a nurse. Your mother was a nurse. He says, my mother worked at Fort Meade. Your mother worked at Fort Meade. So it all wound up. He was speculating whether our mothers knew each other. And of course, neither of us knew the answer, or ever would, until Dodie asked me to do this presentation. And I went through the archives and found a booklet that Jerry Neigebauer had given to my folks when they got married, that they can, you know, people register, and there's things written in there. And sure enough here, right there is Janet Lippold, who attended the ceremonies, and so they were friends. This is what happened in 1948, during that time. World's largest telescope, radial tires invented, latex paint, first tail fins on Cadillacs, the microwave oven. Well, the next thing that happens is the Korean conflict broke out, and Dale was recalled back into the Army. Serving 1 year at 5th Army Headquarters in Chicago, and another year in Korea. Here's a letter home in October 1951 from Dale to Carol. Looks like you've had your share of housework since you went back to the farm. For gosh sakes, honey, don't work too hard because I don't want anything to happen to you or Junior. Well, Junior would have been me. Should have been born in. And a number of pictures of this USO show that featured Danny Kaye. The only pictures I have are of the backside of Danny Kaye. Well, when we were kids, there were no war stories. As far as we knew, none of it ever happened. You know, I think a lot of people in that generation, when the war was over, it was over. They were back, they wanted to get their lives back together and start a family. And that's the way it was with him. I don't know that this picture has anything to do with my folks, other than this was C.D. Erskine Day in 1947. I thought it was a little bit historic. Reverend Erskine, of course, was the longtime minister of the Presbyterian Church in Sturgis, which was just a block away from our house. And this is where we attended church when we were growing up. Dale became an elder in the Presbyterian Church. And became a little bit active in community affairs. In the early 60s, he became president of the Sturgis Chamber of Commerce. Looks like Dale Norman was the vice president there. There's Dale and little Bobby standing in front of Bear Butte. So R.B. Williams had the idea that Bear Butte should be a state park, and that was the project that was undertaken at that time. Dale headed up a committee on the chamber that involved other community leaders, and they lobbied the legislature and Pierre to find the money to buy the land to make Bear Butte a state park. It wasn't a particularly easy fight, and when you go through the history of that and the archives and so forth, there was quite a bit of drama with delays, and then it started up again, and certain important people were going to vote against it, and they changed their mind, and all of that has been recorded pretty well. Eventually it did pass and did get signed by Governor Goodrow. This would be Representative Ernest Ham on the left. Dale Davis next to him. Dale was president of the chamber at the time. Representative Dunmeyer, Dick Williams, Jerry Nigebauer, and Howard Owens. At the time in the newspaper, Dale says it will be up to men of vision in Sturgis to see to it that Bear Butte is properly developed as a state park. Davis reminded the group that the Bear Butte project was a dream of R.B. Williams, who had a vision of tremendous potential there and of the importance of preserving its history. He said Williams is a doer, and his vision caught fire. During the time, Dale also supported a bill that authorized the Game Fish and Parks Department to sell land for relocation of the state highway maintenance shop and office buildings in Sturgis, and supported a bill that allowed a 1 mil increase on assessed valuation, and that bill was designed to allow Meade County to build a new courthouse in 1966. The other things going on at the time when Dale was president of the chamber was the Minuteman missile sites being built in this area. Eventually, Dale, I guess his 7 trips to Pierre to lobby the legislature gave him a political bug, and he decided he wanted to be in the state senate. And so in about that time, he ran for the state senate. Grandfather George went down to visit him one time, and it says in this report that he was a legislative visitor. Tears welled up in his eyes when the venerable gentleman was told that his son, Dale Davis, was doing an able job. Politics didn't last long, though. He only served 1 term. Bill Grahams took over and, of course, served many, many years in the legislature. I don't exactly know what the issue was. I have some recollection that Dale voted the wrong way on an REA bill. And pretty much made everybody out in the country mad, and so he was a 1-term office holder. Davis Barbershop. Dale being retired, I remember the little scooter. We always thought he would crack his head wide open, but he never did. Lots of golf when he was retired. Lots of fishing. Lots lots of traveling to golf tournaments and things, camping around the country. And really a marvelous, he had probably close to 20 years of wonderful retirement after, he continued to work a day or two in the barber shop after he retired. Really enjoyed that. Let's move on to this. Carol, born in Montevideo, Minnesota, second youngest of 9 children. Her parents were Nicholas and Nellie Collins. When she was 15, she started working in a grocery store in Montevideo because she worked after school and Sundays, she rented a small room just to sleep in. She graduated from Monte High School in 1944, 5th in a class of 200 plus. She became a baton twirler in high school, played basketball and softball, and was named outstanding third base player for the region. When she went into nurses, this, by the way, I came across a document that my mother had started in the year 2001, where she was starting to write out a biography of her life. And it was never completed, but that's what I'm reading from here. These are actually her words. I do also remember when I was very young that she gave baton twirling lessons to young girls in Sturgis. She says when she went to nurses training, it was a way for her to get an advanced education. She was the first in her family to do so. She says her mother and dad were hardworking but fun-loving. Dad was a red-headed, freckled Irishman, non-practicing Catholic, while Mom was French and Scottish, who taught school. She says, generally Dad was a grain farmer, but also raised some championship livestock. Mom was involved with the Farm Labor Party and the Farmers Union. I can remember that she would, now this is my mother talking about her mother. Mm-hmm. She says, I can remember that she would sometimes give speeches. It was on the radio promoting the war effort. I think she was quite a liberated woman, except for having 9 kids. Her mother was a staunch Christian Scientist, as was Mom. So backing up here, of course, she married in 1948, started working part-time at the Sturgis Library in 1959, was named head librarian in 1966. Frequently recognized by the State Library Commission for providing outstanding service to the community, began providing school library services and operating the bookmobile through a 3,000 square mile area. Oversaw installation of the first computer in the library. 1974, recognized as Librarian of the Year. November 16th, 1985, Carol Davis Day, proclaimed by Governor Janklow. In 1986, retired from the Sturgis Library. That didn't end her library career, though. She went down to, she and Dale began retirement in Rapid City, and she got a job at the Rapid City Hospital medical reference library. I can remember wondering at the time myself how this was going to go over, since she had never, I don't remember, in my lifetime she had never worked for anybody. She was always the boss, and I figured within about 6 months she'd be running that whole hospital down. So she received lots of awards and honors. In 1997, honored with the Distinguished Service Award and cited for 37 years to library papers. This is her family. growing up in Montevideo, Carol on the left. This is a little nugget that I uncovered. When she was in high school, they had a Fiesta Days, and she was named the Fiesta Day Queen. This was one page from her high school yearbook, and pretty much, when you go through the yearbook, pretty much every page looks like that with lots of signatures. It says she was a friend worth knowing, an honor student, journalism, drama club, student council, ushers club, and carnival committee. Went to nursing school, Presentation College. Here's kind of the Carol that I remember, and that probably most of the people in the room remember. She brought a lot of new and innovative services to the library. I think this was 1971. Xerox is presenting her with a, they call it a telecopier machine. I think what they mean is it's a early fax machine. And that was, those things weren't very common back then. Frances Langan, of course, Mrs. Lushbaugh. Always looking for grants from some outfit or another. Always getting grants and equipment from the state library board. In those years too, she began the support of artists in the area and regular displays of public art here at the Sturgis Public Library. Here's one artist, and this is from 1966, getting ready to display a painting of Main Street. Now, just for the fun of it, does anybody recognize the dapper artist on the left?
I think that's Steve McNinney, isn't it?
Is that Dean?
Well, it's Dean McNinney, sitting right over there. You remember that, Dean?
I sure do.
Now, I believe that this next one is after Carol's time at the library, but I can tell you that any newspaper article or mention of the Sturgis Library was clipped and filed away in her archives. But she was very proud of the way the library, the big building project on City Hall and the library here turned out. Carol had a lifetime love of learning. She was an innovator, brought many new programs to the Sturgis Library. As the people in this room who knew her understand, she was 100% devoted to the Sturgis Library. It was more than a job, it was her calling. During her years here, she would routinely bring home a big stack of books and read them, often reading the ending of the books first. As kids, we just assumed that she had read every book in the library. Now, I'm not sure, I'm just going to flip through this. I came across this, and at the time I thought it was kind of interesting. But these are some, to become a better librarian, Carol took some continuing education courses. So here's one taken in 1986, Change in Libraries, Automation as its Catalyst. Here's one, Basic Reference, Basic Cataloging, Managerial Communication, AV Equipment, Library Management, Film Utilization, Public Relations for Libraries, Children's Services, Library Management 3, Cooperation Takes 2, Collection Maintenance, Telecommunications in Libraries, Library library service to rural patrons. And then, of course, eventually she went to work for the medical library in Rapid, and she continued her education, essentials of online searching, some classification thing, collection development, something. Here's one, she went through and I should have brought one of her watercolor paintings, but she took a watercolor painting course from Black Hills State. There's another continuing education thing. More, some kind of advanced training, concepts of supervision, initial online training course, more training. Here's one called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. So I think this was in support of a letter, or of an award she was up for in, I think, 1974. This is from Bessie Jones. It says, "To whom it may concern, I would like to report a program that Carol Davis, Mrs. Dale Davis, has instigated for the senior shut-ins. She ascertains the interests of the shut-ins, which she feels will have a personal appeal, and delivers them via the bookmobile. I have been a recipient of this service in the past, and I appreciate it very much. I am past 80 years of age and suffered a stroke which has left me semi-handicapped. Carol's efficiency makes her a worthy choice for Librarian of the Year." So she was recognized a number of times in her career for her service to her library patrons, Carol Davis Day, and so on and so forth. By the time Carol had been librarian for a few years, it became clear to the library board that they had a very special person. She and her fellow workers cleaned out an outdated collection, added new materials, brought in state-of-the-art equipment, increased circulation and patron services, started a bookmobile, brought art exhibits to the library, brought new levels of cooperation between the library and the schools, participated in pioneering interlibrary loan services, supervised building projects, and so on. And to conclude this discussion of Carol and the Sturgis Library, I'm going to show you this letter that I came across from Dick and Ruth Williams. This was written in 1974. Dick says, "Carol, what you have done through your planning and leadership is to create an institution which will live forever. It will grow forever, for it embodies people and their needs. It coordinates existing school libraries and services and causes them to grow. This is the finest and most far-reaching library establishment in our state. In the life of a town and community, there are very few who can lay claim to being the soul of an institution. Many know this, and time will prove it. To yourself, you can say, in my heart, I know I'm right. Congratulations, Ruth and Dick Wood." Well, of course, Dale passes away in 1995, and after that, Carol met the second love of her life, Jerry Junick. And they were married on December 27th, 1997. So Jerry came from a wonderful family in Spearfish, very well-respected man, loved by a lot of people in Spearfish, a big supporter of athletics at the college, and a big fundraiser for many of their activities, and a true community leader. I remember the day they got married and the actual ceremony, and the thing I remember about it, Jerry had lost his wife. They had both lost their spouses. And I remember halfway through the ceremony, the minister said, "You know, this is the time in the ceremony where I usually give a little bit of marital advice to the newlywed couple. But he said, in this case, Jerry and Carol have over 100 years of successful marriage between them, and there is just nothing we can say. Here's Carol with her 2 daughters, Lauren and Peggy, the 3 of us. This was from that same, from the wedding day. In 2005, Carol and Jerry were the grand marshals at the Sworn Day Parade in Spearfish. I just came across this. This is not a lot of history, but this was the blizzard of 1984. And I was owning that restaurant at the time. I think that's the Gamble store there, and I think that was about the time the Gamble store fell in. But the reason this is in here, and the reason I remember it, I always had a policy of staying open, keeping the restaurant open during blizzards. And I was there, and I think 1 or 2 of my workers could get there, but I remember this very distinctly because my mother came down on a snowmobile and helped cook that day in the restaurant. And surprisingly enough, we were always very, very busy during blizzards because you've got, I mean, the word gets out and all the truck driver, the snowplow drivers and so forth, they need a place to eat, and all the city workers and ambulance crews and everybody needed a place to eat, so we were always happy to stay open. I can't believe I'm including this picture, but it's just, this is just crazy. Here's my dad and I with Nelson Rockefeller.
Where was
So
that?
I'm going to conclude this by talking just a little bit what it was like growing up in the Davis family. It seemed perfectly normal at the time. Looking back now, after a lifetime of living, it was obviously a very special time. As kids, I recall we had total freedom to come and go as we pleased, very few rules. There was a general edict handed down from my father that if we ever got into trouble at school or into trouble with the police, don't call home for help. We will not bail you out. Discipline, which was only a factor in my case, I guess, was handed down from my father, and it was old school. Like a lot of families, everybody was expected to be there for dinner. Everybody was expected to eat everything on their plate. Luckily, Mother was a wonderful cook. After dinner, typical night would be off to the living room. Dad would lay back in his Barcalounger, kids scattered around. Mother in the corner, sitting in her living room chair, next to a table and floor lamp, reading through a stack of books she brought home, watching TV over the top of her glasses, and surveying the family at the same time. Later, when the kids were gone and Dale and Carol were somewhat retired with their townhouse in Spearfish, it would be a common everyday scene to see Carol sitting at the kitchen counter in Spearfish, TV a little bit going in the background, stack of magazines and newspapers, and a pair of scissors, clipping articles she was interested in. In their retirement, lots of snowmobiling, lots of golfing, lots of fishing. My dad loved to play poker with his buddies in Spearfish. One observation that my dad had made as a barber and talking to many of his customers, he came across this little fact that all of the old people he knew who were doing good in retirement knew how to dance. And so he forced himself, after he retired, to take dance lessons, and he learned how to dance, and they would often go to Elk Creek or or someplace in Spearfish where there was music and they could do the dancing. Concluding, just a couple of little stories here. After Jerry had passed away 12 years after they were married, I would suppose that Carol was about, I'm not sure, maybe 80 or 82. And I went over to see her in Spearfish one day, and I found her in the garage on her hands and knees with a brush. She was scrubbing the garage floor. And I stood there and I said, "What in the hell are you doing?" She said, "Well, I'm scrubbing the garage floor." I said, "It's a garage floor, it's supposed to be dirty." "Well, it's not my garage floor." I said, "Well, I think I'm going to call a meeting of the family. I think you're losing it." Then I know how many families struggle when they have their senior parents and it's time for them to move into assisted living and the parents don't want to go and it's a big drama and a lot of problems for everybody. In Carol's case, she knew that the time would come in her life that she would have to move into assisted living. And so what she did was she went out and researched all of the available places in Spearfish. I'm just reading between the lines, but I'm guessing she interrogated the head-ups pretty good to find out what's going on at each place.
Yeah.
And she eventually selected Edgewood Vista. And the year, whatever year it was that she was planning to move in, she was planning to move in October that year. But in the middle of the summer, about a week before the motorcycle rally, my phone rings. And it's Mother, and she says, "Bob," the phone rings, I answer the phone, she says, "Bob, this is your mother." She says, "I've decided that I'll be moving to Edgewood Vista this Friday." I said, "I thought you were moving in October." She says, "No, I've changed my mind. It'll be this Friday at 9 a.m. So this was like the Friday right before the motorcycle rally. She couldn't have picked a worse time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I could sense by the way she was speaking that there wasn't going to be any discussion about this. She had made this decision, and I was getting my instructions to be there at 9 a.m. with a truck and a few people, and we helped her move. Eventually then, of course, she passed away a couple of years ago in February 2015. While she was in assisted living at both Edgewood Vista and Aspen Grove in Sturgis, she kept her townhouse in Spearfish. I think a lot because my sisters would come up almost all the time to be with her and stay at so they would have a place to stay. So when she passed away, it became the kids' responsibility to clean out that townhouse. You know, and I know a lot of you families have been through this. And here's what happened. We opened up some of these closets, and my sisters discovered that everything in the closets had been cataloged. And then the catalogs had been indexed.
Oh, my.
And one time, years ago, I gave her a mink coat, which she never wore because she thought it was too expensive. So if you wanted to find the mink coat, you would go to the index and then the catalog and find the box, and it was up on a certain shelf in a certain closet. So I doubt that anybody has had a more organized estate than Carol Davis. I want to read just 1 minute here from some of my cousins and so forth. This is from cousin Norman. He recalls that George was a great vocalist. He recalls him playing the piano and singing about 30 verses to Underneath the Old Apple Tree at our Pine Street residence, probably at a Thanksgiving dinner. It says he never took his hat off all that time. He was always ready to leave as soon as he arrived. He said one time, now George and Gail lived in the Pine Street house where I grew up back in the, I guess, 1930s. He said Mildred was in college when George and Gail lived at the Pine Street home. They moved, but never told Mildred. She came home for the weekend and had a heck of a time figuring out where they went. This is from Kim Davis. She talks about as grandchildren were being born, Grandma Davis would go to a chest that she had and get one or two little stocking caps that she had knitted, and she kept the whole family in homemade stocking caps. She still has a couple that both Rod and her are thankful for when blowing snow. So there's more, but I think we're out of time, and I appreciate everybody coming. I'm not sure if I can even answer any questions, but if somebody has a story or something, maybe
I'm gonna tell you one more.
you want to come on up, or what?
That's a,
Well, but you wanted to,
well,
You don't want to be recorded?
you know, your grandmother and my grandmother were the greatest of friends, and your grandmother was the official driver for all the old ladies. And my grandmother always told me what a careful and safe driver she was. But I don't think she ever noticed that there wasn't a straight piece of metal on that old green Pontiac.
Now that brings to mind another story about George, and that is that one time he pulled in front of the barber shop down there and left his car running, and gets out of it and goes in the barber shop. Well, the car backs up, does a half or a semicircle, and goes between two parking meters and backs into the front of Niggebauer Jewelry in downtown Sturgis. So the funny part was, when anybody ever asked him about how that could possibly happen, his explanation was, well, the damn thing must have jiggled into reverse. All right, well, thanks for coming, and thanks for